Earlier this week, I spoke to a few hundred cadets at West Point, and I conducted a seminar for the philosophy faculty there as well. I was happily stunned and utterly thrilled at the open endorsement of our libertarian ideas, as well as the personal admiration for the movement, and specifically for the courage of persons like Congressman Ron Paul and the work of libertarian institutes like Mises and Cato that I heard from many of the cadets and many of the full-time military faculty as well. Here to talk about all this and the popularity of freedom amongst young people is David Boaz, Executive Vice President of the Cato Institute and author of The Politics of Freedom, Taking on the Left, the Right, and Threats to Our Liberties. David joins me now. David, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge. Good to be here.
Thank you. So there I was at the United States Military Academy talking to future military officers, and they start asking me questions in the Q&A period about Hayek and Mises and Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand and where do our liberties come from and what do I do if I'm given an order that I believe is against the Constitution. And I'm a bit blown away to hear this coming from cadets. I'm as high as a kite as I'm driving home. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to talk to David Boaz about this. Should I have been surprised at West Point to hear this?
Well, you know, I'd have been surprised to hear that a few years ago because we don't generally think of the military as a place where libertarianism would be a common idea. But the last few years, I have noticed more evidence of that. A few years ago, I went to a lecture. I just happened to be in Charleston, South Carolina, and I went to a lecture that Sandra Day O'Connor gave to the Citadel. And once she finished, all the students got up, and you know, it might have been just a selection bias, but all the questions were pretty libertarian. They were about gun rights, they were about the rights of the accused, and I was very impressed. And then, I'm sure you've talked about on this show, last year, more military people gave contributions to Ron Paul than to any other presidential candidate. Now, it wasn't very many, and I kind of discounted that because really the total number was pretty small. But I've also been told by people who know the military that among the junior and younger officer corps, which is, you know, the people you were talking to who are going to become the younger officers, that there's a lot of libertarian sentiment. They take an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They sort of generally believe in free enterprise and free markets. And they're not really social conservatives. They deal with a lot of diversity in the military. They're not old-fashioned conservatives. So I think what you have is a fair number of people who, as you say, have actually read Hayek and Mises and Ayn Rand, and a larger number of people who believe in the Constitution, who believe in the American system of free enterprise, and who are not social conservatives.
I think you're right, and I'm happy that I was happy, and maybe I should have known more to expect, and I wouldn't have been surprised. But the course that I did, it wasn't a lecture; it was a Socratic method in a class of a couple of hundred cadets in a philosophy class, and we went back and forth about where our freedoms come from. To a person, I think I managed to interrogate just about everybody in the room. They understood the concept of natural rights. They understood the concept of inalienable rights. They understood the battle in Philadelphia in 1787, the ideological battle between those who believe our rights come from our humanity and those who believed our rights come from the government. And to a person, if they answered me honestly, and I have to believe they did, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, they accepted that our rights come from our humanity and that they cannot be taken away by the president signing a proclamation or the Congress enacting a statute.
Well, it sounds like maybe they had a good philosophy professor, or maybe they had a good history professor. And in fact, at Cato University, our summer seminar, we often have a lecturer who is a history professor at West Point, Rob McDonald, who talks about Thomas Jefferson and the ideas of the founding and makes them engaging and entertaining and informative. So it may be his influence that they have learned these things, but what you found was it worked, that they had gotten these ideas, they understood them, and it's good to know that among people who are going to be leaders, first in the military, and then military people usually go on to be leaders in various walks of life, that these people do understand these ideas. I think that's a good thing. You raise the interesting question. They take an oath of office to the Constitution and to follow lawful orders.
Right.
And I'm sure the question of can there be a conflict between those concepts is something they talk about at military academies.
We are chatting with David Boaz, Executive Vice President of the Cato Institute. One of the things that they asked me about, that they tried to pin me down on, is when is it lawful to disobey an unlawful order? Now, these are young men and women in their late teens, 18, 19, 20, and 21. They will all serve full-time in the military. Most of them will see battle. All of them will be on active duty for a minimum of 6 to 8 years, depending upon which program they've chosen at West Point. And their principal concerns were, what is a just war? And when must I disobey an order that I think is unlawful? Just the fact that they were thinking about that tantalized me. So, of course, we went through the basic just war principles, and I asked them, is the present military activity just under these principles? And, of course, they were reluctant to express themselves on that point. But I can tell you that afterwards, when we had some non-alcoholic cocktails in the hallway of a building called Jefferson Hall, most of them said that the activities in the Middle East by the United States military did not meet the just war criteria. Does that surprise you, David Boaz?
Well, that does sort of surprise me, and one reason is, after all, these are kids who enrolled in the military academy after we entered Iraq, long after we entered Afghanistan, so they knew what they were getting. We've got some veterans here at Cato, many of, well, I mean, there weren't many, but let's say a couple of whom enrolled in the military after 9/11 because they thought we were going to confront Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and go into Afghanistan, and they thought that was a justifiable response to the attack. At least one of them then got sent to Iraq, which was something he had not planned on. But these kids who are 18, 19, 20 years old now, they knew that Iraq was part of the deal, and so to enroll in the military at this point and then discover you think this is not a moral war, that would create a definite dilemma for people like that. Now, they may be hoping by the time they get out of West Point that we will be done in Iraq.
Right.
I certainly hope by the time they get out we'll be done, and that hopefully Iraq will have chastened us and we won't get into any more stupid and unfounded wars.
You and I remember Barry Goldwater. We remember the conscience of a conservative. We remember the last person that ran for president saying he was going to shrink half the government, and if you wanted that done, vote for him, and if you didn't, vote for the other guy. Why is libertarianism so popular amongst young people today who came of age long after the Goldwater and even Reagan years had passed?
Well, I think people are seeing a bigger government failing in all sorts of ways, and that's one of the things. There was a surge of interest in libertarianism in the 1970s, I think in response to basically Vietnam and stagflation and the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s that opened up society for a lot of people. These days, the Cultural Revolution has continued. Society is more open to more people. The whole economic and commercial and social mainstream of American life is open to blacks and women and gay people and immigrants in a way that it didn't used to be. But government in many areas is getting bigger and bigger. It did throughout the Bush years, and it's obviously accelerating in some ways in the Obama years, and therefore you have a lot of people getting interested in these ideas because they want to know what is the alternative to what's going on. And that's why you're seeing sales of Atlas Shrugged soaring. That's why you're seeing sales of The Road to Serfdom soaring. You know, there are 2 new biographies of Ayn Rand being published this month, and they're getting reviewed lots of places, and I suspect they will sell well, and they will generate more interest in her own books. So people are responding, and when they see government expanding, they want to know what is the alternative to big government, and that's how they find libertarian ideas.
Switching gears a little bit, in the past week, the President of the United States sent his principal advisors to the most watched television programs in America, which are the Sunday morning interview shows. And they said to a person, Fox News is not a news organization, it's an advocacy organization, and so we don't have to treat it as one. The President of the United States last night said, well, I'm not really concerned about this battle over between the White House and Fox News. I don't lose much sleep over it. And Congressman Grayson of Florida, who, by the way, is not bad on economic issues, but on this issue seems to be a two-bit political hack, said Fox is the enemy. Not Fox is an advocacy organization. Fox is the enemy of the American people. Question, David, should those of us who work here, or those of us who work in the media, or those of us in the business of trying to get ideas out there, be concerned that the government might want to interfere with the expression of free ideas with which the government disagrees?
Well, right now, I think what you're having is a debate. The president is denouncing Fox News, and Fox has plenty of opportunities to shoot back on that. And some other media, Jake Tapper from ABC, asked very good questions of the White House press secretary. How can you say this is not a legitimate news organization? I am not worried at this point that they're going to crack down on Fox News, but we have to remember they're trying to impose new government regulations on the internet right now. They have talked about bringing back the fairness doctrine, and they openly say the reason for that is they don't like the domination of conservative talk radio. They control the major networks, they have the universities on their side, they have the major newspapers on their side, but conservative talk radio drives them up a wall, so they want a new government regulation to control that. I think Fox will be able to hold its own right here, and if I may say, for the past 8 years, Fox News did too much cheerleading for the Bush administration, so I can understand why some people think that Fox has been too partisan. But look, MSNBC is partisan. The Washington Post has just endorsed every Democrat running for office in Virginia. Right. That's okay. They're a newspaper. That's their opinion.
Right. Earlier this week, the president unleashed Ken Feinberg, a lawyer who works in the Justice Department with the wacky title, or at least in the media we call him this, the pay czar, who came out with a list of regulations that he wrote on his own, limiting the compensation of executives from corporations that took TARP funds. I did the research and I looked at where his power came from, and it came from one of the stimulus acts in the early part of the Obama administration in February of 2009. And then I thought to myself, TARP funds, that money was loaned in September and October of 2008. You mean the government rewrote the law retroactively to let it control compensation to banks who received TARP funds after they had received the money? Answer, yes. How fair or unfair is that?
There's been a lot of complaints about czars in the Obama White House, and a lot of it I just brush off. I mean, they're really White House advisors. They don't have any power the president doesn't have. This czar does have power. Congress gave him power and specified that he makes these decisions on his own, and they cannot be appealed. They can't be appealed to the president or to the Congress or to the courts. It is unreviewable power. Now we'll find out if the courts think this power is unreviewable, if Congress can make power unreviewable and unappealable, but it is really a scary prospect. I'll tell you, though, one of the things it should scare people into doing is not taking government money, because this is for 7 firms that took billions of dollars of government money. And I still don't want an unreviewable, anonymous, unappealable pay czar working out of the White House making decisions for these companies. But look, the next time the government comes offering $10 billion to a company that's in trouble, I hope the company executives will say, wait a minute, maybe we don't want Obama with the power to fire our CEO, and maybe we don't want some anonymous bureaucrat in the White House with the power to slash our CEO's pay and all the rest of our paychecks. So this is a warning that when you get in bed with the government, you get up with more than a headache.
David Boaz, thanks very much for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.